Okay, our first speaker this evening is Ted Hathaway from the Hennepin County Library, Special Collections, Minneapolis Central Library. According to Ted, he has been working at the library since Noah's time and the Big Flood. That at times perhaps have provided him with relevant skill sets that work with water damaged material. It's not foreign to him. My understanding is that he at one time also worked as a carpenter, which may also have come in handy during that flood. Ted has been manager of preservation, special collection, digitization at Hennepin County Library since 2011. But he began work at the library in the 1980s. Well, everything is historic tonight that we're talking about. It's all historic. He just feels right at home, right? Yeah. Which, starting in the 1980s, which has provided him with an opportunity to work in virtually all the library's subject areas and their collections. In addition to managing special collections, he works on a variety of projects involving the physical and digital collections.
So I think part of the point of the presentation tonight is to talk about your stuff with respect to what organizations might want. And I'm going to talk a little bit about that, but I'm going to talk more generally about preserving your stuff, memorabilia, whatever you want to call it, more generally, and touch a little bit on institutional relationships. I think my MNHS colleague will probably talk a little bit more about that. So at any rate, but I think these will be valuable things to keep in mind, even with respect to talking to an institution. So one of the things that I try to get people to think about is sort of not the philosophy, but kind of the broader considerations to your collections, let's call them that, your collections, not your stuff, is why do you keep it in the first place? And I think the two most usual reasons that people keep collections, keep materials in their lives, is to remember and be remembered. So an example of remembering would be like a scrapbook of a vacation you took. Maybe it's been 30 years now, and that's a long time, but when you flip through the scrapbook, you relive that trip to France all over again. And it's a very valuable way to reinforce your memories as well. Now, obviously, it also gives a record of an important part or important experience in your life. So, there's some kind of historical basis to it. But oftentimes things like that are just, you're reinforcing your memories, you're enjoying them again, those bits of your life. So those are significant. Another thing that reason people will collect things is so they can be remembered. Now that might be copies of letters or photographs or things like that not only are important to you, but also to your family members or people you know, or people you don't know who you hope or think might be interested in this sort of record. So you have all this stuff, and you are trying to figure out how to approach it, how to go through it. More often than not, what you have might have a lot of duplication, might have a lot of low-quality things to it. I remember my late mother-in-law very diligently kept scrapbooks year after year, and they were full of these terrible photographs. They were blurry, and they were turning yellow and all that kind of stuff. And most of our collections can really bear weeding, particularly now that we have digital content, and you can take 20 pictures of your cat doing that one thing that you always thought was funny. Well, we don't really need to see all that kind of thing. But before you go into reviewing your collection, I always encourage people to get help. And not only help in the sense of like having somebody else go help you go sort through it, but also just to kind of, and this is where talking to an institution can also be important, is that how important is something like this? Lots of people might have something that is significant to a local institution and not even realize it. So the picture on the left here, this is a picture of a crowdsourcing event that we had regarding the John Glanton photographs years ago. And this not only brought crowds of people to 4 different events, but even local media. We knew the collection was important, but not that important. And also, sometimes you can have things out there that people don't realize are significant until they actually see it. So the guy on the right's a former county employee. He's holding up a picture of his grandfather who was a blind piano tuner. His mother, that guy's daughter, was the only sighted member of that family. So what did they not do? They didn't take pictures of each other. It didn't make any sense. This was literally the first time he and other members of his family had ever seen a picture of his grandfather. Happened to show up in a newspaper photograph collection. So just keep in mind that what you have, you may not know what's significant and what isn't, and getting help, getting other feedback can be really important in winnowing away at it. Another thing about knowing yourself is what I like to call a keeper and a tosser. Now, if we were in England, tosser would mean something else, but in this case, keeper means you keep everything, and tosser means you throw everything away. So on the right here, maybe you can see it. It says, Jenny's baby's clothes, 6 to 9 months, 1995. A friend of ours literally kept everything that was related to her daughter. They could not park their car in the garage because it was full of her daughter's effects. On the other hand, the day my father went off to college in 1945, his mother went up to his room and threw everything away. So we have nothing left from his childhood. So most people are somewhere in the middle, but know where you are. And again, this is where it's important to get help when you're going through your collection. If you're a tosser, you might get rid of more than you really should, and vice versa. So people want to know where do you start? And I usually say start with the basics that say the most about the individual, not so much the records of their lives, like maybe their college diploma or something like that, or God help us, their tax records, unless they were an embezzler or something like that, or something interesting. But expressions over interests, so like that set of correspondence, or maybe a creative work of some type, rather than simply like somebody keeps a scrapbook of news articles or something like that, or a coin collection, which anybody could have. That doesn't really say that much about the individual. And like I said, keep formal records to a minimum. Some of you have heard digitization as a great way to declutter. So I was talking to Dean earlier, and he has this huge postcard collection, which some of you may have heard about. And friends of his say, why don't you just put it all on your phone, Dean, and then you won't have to worry about all this paper and taking up space in your bedroom, that kind of thing. Well, I would argue that decluttering by going digital is only valuable if you're going to get rid of it anyways. And the reason for that is that physical artifacts most of the time are the ultimate backup to whatever is in a digital collection. I'll talk about that in a minute. Digitization can result in preservation, but only when the original format is toast. A good example of this are newspapers. Newspapers are made out of an unstable medium that eventually turns to potato chips and just falls apart. Or obsolete formats like reel-to-reel discs or VHS tape, that kind of thing. Those things are doomed. And backing them up, making digital copies is kind of a last-ditch effort to preserve the original. So, this gets to the point I was going to make, the triumph of the analog over the digital. And all the things that can go wrong with physical artifacts. So on the left here, we've got a picture of a guy, Johnny Cochran, was traveling through Minneapolis, had a picture of himself taken way back in the 1880s. Still looks pretty good. Silver nitrate emulsion photography is literally bits of metal embedded in an emulsion without chemical action that can last indefinitely. On the other hand, how many of you remember WordPerfect? How are those files doing for you now? That's only 25 years ago. Another analogy I like to say is I could take a book and set it on the counter over there, and we could all leave and come back in 50 years. Yes, we'll all be around in 50 years, I assure you. And it would still be there, and it would still be recognizable, and you could still flip through it, and you could still read it. Now, if I did that with a flash drive, we might not even recognize what it is. Much less would we be able to find a device to read it, or software to read it, or the data on it would be any good. I mean, all of these things can go wrong. Obsolescence of format, software, equipment, corruption of the files. Digital content requires constant vigilance to make sure that it endures. And that's why keeping the physical original can be really important. There's lots of things that you can do to help with your digital content because we all create a lot of it with our phones, for example. Make sure you download it. There's lots of storage solutions. Don't store them to flash drives or CDs. Cloud solutions are probably the best, or an external hard drive or some combination of the two. So don't leave it on your phone. Phones fall into toilets and all kinds of things can go wrong with them. And also there's ins and outs like try to stick with non-proprietary file formats. And keeping multiple copies is good. The last line there, locks. So like lots of copies keep stuff safe. That's a good idea. Have it up in the cloud, have it on your hard drive, or if you don't have it in the cloud, have it on multiple hard drives, different physical locations, or best of all, pass it around to the family. That's one thing I did with some recordings I made of my father when we did interviews, is I made multiple copies and gave them to my relatives, so somebody's going to have it. I'm not going to get too much in the technology here. There's a bunch of tools you can get out there. A lot of them are fairly inexpensive. You can also use vendors. Astound is a good example of that. They're pretty spendy. You can do a lot of damage with your phone as far as making digital copies of physical materials. There's also slide and negative scanners. The question would be also like, Dean's got his physical postcard collection. Why don't you put it on your phone? The work of doing that can take a long time. One of the things that's valuable about digitization, though, as I mentioned, sorry to use you so many times as an example here, Dean, is that digital copy becomes the thing that people use, and it allows you to better preserve the physical copy because people aren't handling it as much. And that's an example of preservation through digitization, or digitization becomes an exercise in preservation. Is the digital copy is the thing that people access, and you can preserve the originals better. And one of the things I'm going to make an argument for as far as keeping your stuff viable or useful or interesting to other people is efficiency of storage. We'll talk about it in a few minutes. Organizing your collections. Weed early and often, particularly when you dump that stuff off your phone, take the opportunity to go through it and weed out the 20-odd cat pictures or whatever. I don't have it in for cats. I'm not a J.D. Vance in disguise here or anything like that, talking about crazy cat ladies or anything. But you know what I mean as far as multiple photos and when you really only need one or two good ones. Make sure stuff is identified. What do we have here on the right? The back of an unidentified photograph. And don't just say Bob. And you know who Bob is, but your kids don't. So if you can date it and put your name on it, that can be really, really valuable. When my aunt died, she had trays of slides, and her daughter had no idea what to do with them. And I looked through them, and I said, well, your mother gave you a gift because every one of those slides was identified. So at least she had a record there, and it was very well stored, and she knew what everything was. So at least she could make decisions based on that, and she was informed about what it is. Write it down and share. Remember, I talked about sharing your digital copies with relatives. Another thing that you might want to do with your own collection is create what we call in the archives realm a finding aid, which is basically like a catalog or an index describing what is in the collection. Now, it doesn't have to be some elaborate thing. It can be something very, very simple, like, sorry, Dean, the Dean Borghorst postcard collection. Well, that doesn't tell you what's in it, but at least it tells you that collection is there. And it has 15,000 postcards. Minimal information, but it's good information, at least to start out with. But you can also start out with some basic things when you're organizing your photographs or your letters or what have you. What person does it pertain to? And maybe a range of dates. Fairly simple stuff, but important and a good way to organize it, and it will also help people go through it. Same things with photographs. A couple things here. Some of you folks may have old photo albums that are in various storage types. On the right here, we've got some slides that are in vinyl sleeves. Vinyl is really bad. You want more of a polycarbonate plastic to put those in. Or the ones on the left there with the photo prints that are behind a plastic shield. That's also not really a good idea. Some real old ones, like the black and white photos on that black paper, for some reason that stuff lasts pretty well. It doesn't degrade that well. But generally speaking, you don't want to put things behind shields or sleeves that much. If you can just, and if for no other reason, they take up less space if you put them into boxes with inner leaves. Scrapbooks. Scrapbooks are probably best left the way they are, rather than trying to take them apart. They're sometimes referred to as the archivist's bane, just because you're putting in a whole bunch of different materials, usually on an acidic background. And also, it's a lot of different material types that just aren't well arranged. On the other hand, it is a real creative expression for a lot of people, and it gives a purposeful order. Remember, I talked about the trip to France scrapbook. That's this kind of cohesive unit of a bit of memory there that's all pertaining to that one subject. And people put a lot of their own personality into it. They have there can be a certain personal element to it, a visual appeal, that kind of thing. But really, it's not a preservation method. It's more of a craft. You got glue and tape. Never use glue or tape, please. You can see in this example here, the tape turns brown, and the rubber cement that's behind that program, eventually all that stuff, it becomes discolored, and it falls off anyways. So it's not worth getting into. If you really want to combo both the scrapbook and the creative expression idea, I would encourage you to do it virtually. So I'm getting near the end. I hope I don't want to take too much time here. So physical storage, like I said, if you come up with those broad categories and put them into their respective containers, whether it's slides into a box or photos into a box or letters like this into individual folders and label them, the benefit of all of this is that you are condensing everything. You're putting in things into smaller and smaller containers, and because you have identified those things, when you spin off the mortal coil, sorry for the grimdark portion of our presentation, your kids will come in and you've put it all in this one nice, neat place for them that they can understand, or whoever your survivors are. Or if you're talking to an institution and you come in and give them this neatly organized thing, they're going to say, thank you, as opposed to a bunch of stuff that's thrown into a box that's been sitting in a moldy basement for 20 years. Speaking of moldy basements, so you've done all this work. You've stored everything, and everything is described, and it's compact. Where do you put it? You put it in the basement, right? I don't know how many people do that. They say, yeah, it's been sitting on a concrete floor in my basement for the past 10 years. And, of course, you're always going to have condensation no matter how dry your basement is. And there's going to be some degradation of it. The best place is probably like on a shelf in a closet on the main floor. Don't put it in a hot attic either, because that's probably the most climate-controlled part of your house is the main living area there. And also you're keeping it in a dark place. We've already talked about digital storage there, keeping everything together, standard backups, whether cloud or external hard drives or the combination, and also to make that finding aid. Share the finding aid. So every family usually has one member that is kind of the historian in the family, and maybe that's you and you have all the stuff, but let people in your family know that you have the stuff. And that can be important also, again, post you, somebody wants to know what to do with this stuff. I already know, I can already think my niece is probably going to be the person that's going to be most interested in the family in the next generation for carrying things on. Knowing that in advance, knowing that in advance is helpful, and you can help them by letting them know that you have this stuff. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Yves Hoppie is a collections associate in the collection department at the Minnesota Historical Society. She has been working with incoming acquisitions to the museum and library collections for 5 years. She has a degree in art history from the University of Minnesota Twin Cities and has worked with collections big and small, including the Winona County Historical Society, the James Ford Bell Special Collection at the University of Minnesota. Thank you very much for being here.
Okay, I have a sick loved one at home, so I'm hoping to keep my mask on, but let me know if you cannot hear me, and I will repeat or very briefly from December 2019 through March 2020, I did give tours at the state capitol. You might be aware of why I stopped giving them in March 2020, but I'll try to project. Okay, well, we've already done my intro, but I thought that I would add also this photograph of my sneaky celebrity shot with the Jolly Green Giant, who might be my favorite object in our collection. He is 9 feet tall, he is made of fiberglass, and when he arrived, he was full of spiders. Okay, so I'm going to do a little bit of a combination presentation. I'm going to talk partially about MNHS, and then I also wanted to talk about other organizations and museums, just to give you a sense of MNHS is not the only option out there, and we'll just go from there. So from MNHS, I wanted to share our mission, because I'm going to come back to it later. What I wanted to point out here is that when museums are writing our mission statements, why do museums exist? We are thinking about cultivating curiosity. We're thinking about creating an inclusive, empathetic, and informed society. We're teaching people about how our history shapes, inspires, and informs our present in the hopes that by engaging with this, we're better citizens of our communities. I also will do part of my tour spiel about the MNHS collection. So I've got a bunch of big numbers: 250,000 objects, 6,000 works of art, 300,000 photographs, 50,000 cubic feet of manuscripts, and then there's another 50,000 cubic feet of government archives, 500,000 printed works, 1,500 cataloged moving images, and more. So, thinking about why do museums collect? Why do museums have objects in the basement at all? So the primary things that we're thinking about in my department is we're thinking about preservation. We're caring for materials for future generations. So this involves preserving them by caring for them through conservation and careful storage, so that when something is in the museum collection, we are hoping to extend its life indefinitely. There are some objects that we're not going to be able to do that with because they are made out of plastics that are degrading, but ideally, the way that conservation science works is that we're hoping to have it for 100, 200, 500 years. We're thinking about education. Visitors come to sites. At MNHS, we have a sites network across the state. And so as people are coming in, we want them to be able to see things and learn about them. And then outreach. We are sharing resources with communities to fulfill some of those imperatives on that other slide about how do we reach out to people so that they are engaged in their community. They have a sense of shared history, so that as we understand our histories, we also understand our present and our future. How are museum collections used? So thinking about why are you donating something to a museum? How are we thinking about what will happen to it once it is in the museum collection? So one of the primary forms that I engage with is research. Researchers are coming on site, and they are also communicating with us online, receiving scans, PDFs, and even virtual visits over webcam. And these people might be they might be genealogists who are looking into their family history. They could be professional researchers who are working on a book. They might be working on a documentary. I've worked with people around the world. I spent a number of days trying to get in contact with somebody from Ireland, and we kept missing each other because of time zones. Exhibits. This is the part that I think a lot of people think of most famously when they come to a museum, is we have big gallery spaces with lots of objects on display. And that is where the primary way that I think a lot of people learn from objects in the collection. We have digital and published content. So there is an online catalog of many of the objects in our collection. That is true for a lot of museums. MNHS is currently at about, I think, 25% digitization, but we're making progress on it every year. We share things on social media, and we also publish magazines and books. And then, again, outreach. Sometimes we will go out into the community. I was desperately trying to find a picture of this, and I couldn't find any that I felt like I had a license for. But the Prince Purple Rain costume was on display, and we also sent some Prince cutouts to Twins Field when they had a Prince event. And I got some pretty good pictures of my coworkers, like in their full Prince Purple Rain costumes. What does it mean to be in a museum collection? So getting more into, if you're thinking about donating, people have a lot of questions for me about what am I doing? What is this process like? And what's going to happen to my object? So when you are donating something to a museum collection, you are adding it to the permanent collection. The museums, when we collect, we are intending to keep things indefinitely, in perpetuity. Museums do not collect things that they are intending to deaccession at a later date. And one of the important things to note here is that you are legally transferring the ownership. It means that the museum is likely going to have the rights to reproduce it in educational material. It also means that if a descendant comes back in a generation and wants it back, that is probably not going to be legally possible. So it's best to check in with the family before you proceed with anything. Is there a niece, is there a grandchild that wants this? Because if in 50 years they find out that this was donated and they are hoping to have it back in the family, that is not going to probably be an option because the legal transfership has been transferred to the museum. And museum professional ethics mean that we cannot necessarily return things to families. One of the biggest questions, I want to donate something to the museum. What kinds of information do I need to have? So these are my ideal questions. I don't always get all of them, but as you guys are going through your collections, thinking about what you might want to donate, these are the types of questions you can expect to be asked. So first of all, what is it? Do you know what it is? People don't always know what it is. Sometimes I have something appear on my desk and the donor says, do you know what it is? And I say, no, do you? And then we look at each other. And I have actually solved those problems at times by simply texting a photograph of it to my dad, who said, oh, that's a pea sizer. I used it at my first job when I was 16 at the Green Giant plant. It's a very strange machine with many small holes in it. How was it used? There's many ways for things to be used in this world. And so, for example, if you have carpentry tools, do you know if this was used in commercial carpentry? Was this used in artisan carpentry? Do you know anything about it? Who made it or used it? Sometimes this is easy. Sometimes there's a really big brand label right on it. Sometimes it was handmade, and sometimes we don't know. What dates and time periods are associated with it? You might get lucky again. You might have a date right on it. If not, if it's something that's been in your family, well, my dad used it. And then you know when your dad was alive. And we can use that time range to figure out when this would have been used. And then are there stories you can share about it? One of the things that we're always thinking about at MNHS is what story does this tell? And sometimes there are things that accompany an object that might not be immediately obvious. So I picked this Hibbing Winter Frolic button for my picture because it has a lot going on here. So 3 different stories can be told with this one small button. It's about 1 inch. So we've got the Hibbing Winter Frolic in 1982. So we can see that in Hibbing, they're having a winter celebration as a community. We also have this, I was the one who cataloged this button, and I was very careful to say Snoopy-esque figure in the catalog because I do not believe that is a licensed Snoopy. But we can see that Snoopy was important to people. Charles Schulz is a Minnesotan originally, and that Snoopy is an important character to Minnesotans. And then finally, this button came into the MNHS collection through the collection of Senator Dave Durenberger, who was a prolific button collector. I received 2 full banker boxes of buttons from him. And that also tells a story of being a legislator, being engaged in the community. He was turning out to all kinds of community events. I believe that he probably attended the Hibbing Winter Frolic, and that is where he got this button. And so that's something that you won't see on it, but because that story comes along with it and it's in our catalog, if we are telling stories about how have Minnesota legislators engaged with their communities, or we're talking about Senator Dave Durenberger personally, this story comes along with it. And so every object has stories like this. So if you can keep those in your family, you can know how was this used? Did somebody wear this at their graduation? Things like that, those things that are sort of intangible stories, those are also important to museums. Getting into, I would like to donate this to a museum. What do I do? There's lots of types of museums in the United States. We're very lucky. There's lots of kinds. They can be focused on regions, eras, historical events, themes, and other affiliate groups. So here in Minnesota, I don't think I know every museum in Minnesota, but I am starting to work on it. So we have county historical societies in most counties. Many areas also will have regional or city historical societies of some kind. Those are often a lot smaller. They maybe run out of a city hall or something like that. But I have been very pleasantly surprised to find that places like West St. Paul have a West St. Paul Historical Society. There are special collections at universities. For example, at the University of Minnesota, there is a Jewish Immigration Archive. So that might be an important one for looking at that very specific topic. There are religious archives. These are, for example, the diocese has their own archives. Many of the larger religious bodies have organizational archives. And then sometimes community churches that are standalone will have archives of their own. And then we also have other affiliate groups, so cultural heritage. So if you are of Swedish descent, the American Swedish Institute might be interested. There's the Norwegian American Heritage Institute. There's many groups like that. So when you are locating and contacting a museum, you're going to probably end up going online, Googling around, trying to figure out where does this make the most sense. Feel free to contact any and all of them. Hopefully you'll get responses from as many of them as you can. And you're probably going to be asking for an archivist, a curator, collections manager, or registrar. When you're calling or sending an email, if you're not sure what to do, specify that you're interested in donating an object or any type of material, and you should be getting routed somewhere like there. If you end up with the people who take the money, you're probably in the wrong spot, and you'll need to get back around to the curatorial and collections, though I'm sure any place would also be happy to take a financial gift as well. Many places are online now, MNHS included, that will have digital forms that they are asking you to fill out that help organize that information as it's coming in. I have some tips for planning for your donations. One of the biggest ones of all is that donating to a museum takes longer than people expect. The shortest I have ever turned something around at MNHS was about 3 months. I have also worked on donations that have taken 6-7 years. And so be prepared that the timeline for it is probably going to be a lot longer than you're expecting, and that it is ideal to start this before you are downsizing and the movers are coming. I have had to work getting things out of a house at the same time that the movers were there. It's possible, but it's very stressful for everybody. So the more lead time that you have, the more advanced planning you have, much happier everybody will be. You should also consider any legal and financial paperwork. For you to donate something to a museum, you have to be the one who legally owns it. So if it is not yours, you should be in contact with the person who has the ability to sign any paperwork for it. If you are intending to submit anything on your tax forms, you may need to seek a professional appraisal. Museums will not be able to do any kind of financial appraisal for you. You will need to seek out a professional. We can talk a little bit about that. And it is, again, best to have that done before the museum comes to pick it up, because it can become a real scheduling mess if you've got a lot of people moving around the object in a short period of time. I would also recommend sorting out the materials you intend to donate to ensure non-donations aren't mixed into the delivery. I have gotten somewhat panicked calls before saying, wait, the wrong photo came. Can I please have that back? We've been able to figure it out, but best to separate things out so that what is going to the museum is exactly what you were intending to go. And then it's also good to sort of philosophically think about what kind of personal information would you like to share. Some people like to put credit lines with their donations. So you might say, gift of Joe Smith. You might want to give it in the memory of somebody else. If there is sensitive information involved in any of your materials, social security numbers, financial documents, or parts of family lore that you might not be ready to have on a museum website, think about those, and those can be conversations that you can have with the curator. We are able to restrict and redact information. It's not always ideal depending on what things are, but we have absolutely done things like we will wait 15 years to release those records because they have some private information that we would like some time to pass before that becomes something that anybody walking into the museum can come and take a look at. I put this workflow in here, and I do not expect you to actually read this tiny text, but we spent many, many hours in the department trying to make this a beautiful workflow. It's never worked. This is what it looks like on the internal side. Your part is over here with these 5 steps. So you're going to get in contact with the museum. At MNHS, you're probably going to hit me first. I answer all of the emails and the phone calls, and I do a little bit of triaging. The next step is curatorial review. This is the step that can take the longest time. This is when the curator asks follow-up questions. They might need to be doing some research. Sometimes this involves looking at what's already in the collection. How would this object benefit, complement the collection? Sometimes it's trying to understand what the object is better so that we can do right by it. If the curator is interested in adding it to the collection, then there is a presentation to our acquisitions committee. As far as I'm aware, all museums have a form of acquisition committee. This can be something that takes a very long time. Sometimes museums are having those votes once a year. At MNHS, we do it weekly because we have a lot going on. Then the next step is going to be paperwork. At MNHS, we have something called a deed of gift. This is that legal transfer of ownership from the individual to the institution. It's one piece of paper, but it has a lot of very small words on it. We can get into the legalese. And then finally, the materials are entered into the cataloging queue for cataloging and digitization as needed. That process can take a real range of time. Sometimes things are cataloged and available within 3-4 weeks. Some things have been waiting to be digitized for 6-7 years. Just sort of depends on capacity. And then I wanted to talk about MNHS specifically. What do we collect? So within our collection, we have a huge range of materials. We have everything from manuscript collections of organizational records and personal papers, fine art, audio and visual, and 3-dimensional materials. The most important part at MNHS is the Minnesota story. So we are looking for it to have a significant tie to Minnesota, the land, and to life here. Within that, here are some things that might be helpful as you are going through your collections. We are looking for photographs to have original clear images in good condition. We would like identification when possible. I don't always get all 3, but at least one is probably going to be necessary. If you think about a photograph existing in a museum collection, we're looking for some keywords that we can attach to it. And so if we don't know who's in it, we don't know where it is, and we don't know when it was taken, it's very hard for us to make that accessible to researchers in a meaningful way. And that is why we are almost always going to be declining an unidentified photograph. For paper materials, I think that is probably going to be the biggest set for this group. We do not collect what we call small ephemeral personal records. So graduation certificates, birth certificates, tax documents, and things like this. That's because these are primarily duplicated in other record forms through the government, through your school records, and things like this. We do collect personal papers that tell a story of your life. So we collect diary collections, letters. A popular section of the MNHS collection is World War II letters that are being written from service members abroad and their families back home. It's always great if we have both sides of correspondence, but it's given that they were mailed somewhere else, it's understandable that we often only get one side. And then for artifacts, we are looking for items that are documenting life in Minnesota, especially those made and used in Minnesota. We do have collections of items that were manufactured outside of Minnesota, brought to Minnesota and used here, but we're especially interested in things that were made by Minnesota manufacturers or produced by individuals. And some topics that our collection is strong in are activism, community organizations, arts, sports, local business, and then we are interested in religious or culturally specific items as well. What don't we collect? This is a hard part of my job. A big part of my job is disappointing people. It's never fun, but it's part of our work. So materials without a strong connection to Minnesota. If it's not from Minnesota, it's not going to really fit into the Minnesota Historical Society collection, but it might have a very happy life at the Wisconsin Historical Society. Duplicative materials, we are plumb full of wedding dresses. No more wedding dresses. We have 150. We cannot take any more, I have been told. We do not take family Bibles, And we also do not usually collect second copies of published books, newspapers, copies of photographs from the newspaper, and things like this. We just don't have enough space to be able to store duplicate copies of things, and so we have to be selective. And then one of the softer topics here, it gets a little squishy, is materials that are better served at other organizations. We're very lucky to live in a world where we have so many different repositories that are interested in materials, but it means that collections start to specialize. So for example, the Performing Arts Archive, hosted at the University of Minnesota, has become the go-to hub for performing arts-related materials. And the reason that MNHS might take, for example, a program from the Guthrie and send it over to the University of Minnesota is so that when a researcher who is looking at the history of theatrical performance, they can go to one archive and they can have access to the most materials there. So being turned away from one institution is not necessarily a representation of its value, but rather that it might be most beneficial to people at another place, or that another organization might have better resources to take care of an object. We have sent some things up to Duluth, where they have some better skilled people related to shipping history, and they are better at taking care of ships and ship-related things. So you might get bounced around a little bit. This can be frustrating for people, but I encourage you to stay persistent. I send people other places, and I also receive referrals. This is a very beautiful part of the work to me. I understand it can be frustrating, but I encourage you to stick with it. And then I'm very embarrassed. I left all of my beautiful bookmarks on my desk before I left for the day. So I at least have this for contacting MNHS. If you are interested in donating to our collection or looking at something that is in our museum object collection, you can reach me at collections@mnhs.org. If you're interested in accessing printed material, a book, a map, a photograph, government records, reference at MNHS. And then we also have beautiful online catalogs, so you can look at the objects that have been photographed and put online at mnhs.org/search/collections. I'd like a better URL for that one. And then mnhs.org/library also has the primary access for books, maps, photographs, and things like that. And then I also have my contact information up here. You are welcome to send me questions, and I will do my best to get you routed. Okay, I think that will be my presentation.
All right, our third speaker tonight, Jonathan Campbell with H&B Gallery, located at 2730 Hennepin Avenue. Jonathan has been with the gallery for just over 32 years and has been appraising items and pricing all consignment items for the last 12 years. Being involved in consignments, he has a vast knowledge of antiques to new furnishings and household accessories. His first 10 years at H&B, he assisted Anthony Skornavaco, yes, with his national shows. Anthony has his business. St. Paul, yeah. Does national shows, right? Working with him, Jonathan learned a lot about period furniture and what value antiques had on the current market. During his time at H&B Gallery, he has set up and conducted over 100 estate sales. So, quite experienced.
Thank you. So I'm here to talk about consignment estate sales and also estate planning. We're finding more and more people don't do this. They come to us at the very last minute, and decisions have to be made quickly. Where do things go? Where things could have been properly donated, unfortunately, don't get to where they belong. They go to a trash heap these days. We encourage more and more people, find out what you have. As like Ted and Eva said, it's knowing how to care for them, having as much information. We find so many things that should go into their hands and not ours. And we try to take that time when we're setting up estate sales or people call us for consignment. It's like, oh, I'm sorry if you would have called us 3 months ago. We could have taken this stuff in because we're finding more and more furniture is coming at us at a pace that it's not going out. And it's a little closer. Is this better? All right, great. I'm horrible at this. But I guess in the part is really preparation. We can come in and consult, and we can help with going, maybe Historical Society is going to want to have this, but you need to make those kind of connections right away to find out in your planning, is this something that has more of a historical value to it, monetary, or is this more sentimental? And what you're keeping and letting go is really important to have knowledge of that right away. For when we come in, then we can help facilitate with this donations, even selling. Is it going to be better in an estate sale setting to have it in the home? Is that a viable thing for you? Is it too emotional? We've come into situations where we've started an estate sale and it's just too much for the family to take on. And so it's a difficult thing to deal with. And every day I'm like turning down a lot. It's very unfortunate to be, that's, as Eva said, it's part of our job, is let people down going, I'm sorry, but there's too much of this out there. But the further out that you can plan, there's no guarantees. We don't know how long we're going to be around. But have kids know. I mean, we come across stuff all the time where we're like, this seems to be more of a family thing and we shouldn't be selling it. Are you sure you've reached out to nieces, nephews, cousins, someone that should have this before we try to sell it? Because it's, even though it has a value, we take consideration in what the objects in which we're handling. So all I can really say is preparation and getting us in for estate consulting. Because sometimes we go into a thing, it's like, well, you have this and that would be worth selling. This other stuff is very nice, but it could be put better use if it's donated. There's organizations all over for donations, and sometimes there's things that have, like I said, the historical thing where we would direct you into Ted or Eva's direction to go, you have this collection of leather-bound books. Their first editions, check with Ted, see if this is something that they would take in at the library. It's, but you have to do that in advance because it is all timing. We're hanging on to one collection for a South Dakota county that is waiting to get things shipped to them and that, but it takes a while. We probably will have it for a year before they get the funds to pack the stuff up and get it, but it was a great client of ours and we've decided to store it for the meantime till they can get the money to get it to their museum. And so it's planning. Stuff like this I do a lot of this with more financial organizations, with estate planners and that. So it is, coming into preparing for your kids, grandkids, what you want them to have, or what they don't know you have. Because we do that too. We come across and we find, I was in one house where they were like, oh, this is all silver plate that grandma had. Well, it wasn't. It was a collection of George and Sterling. That was beyond. It's like, well, do you know what was the history? Because a lot of times we get people that are transported from New York and they lived in England, or they had a relative that bought all this stuff and it came down. It's just there's more to it than just the value of the object itself. And as much as I would love to have sold it, but luckily a lot of the family members kept it because now they had a history that went with the pieces and they're using it. They're putting it out on their table now, and it's good. There's one thing I would say, with China and all the smalls and all this stuff that we've all cherished, we put in our cabinets, we look at it, and that's all we do. Use it. It was made to be used. It wasn't made to be put in a cabinet and looked at. I tell the kids now, my granddaughter, put it in the dishwasher. It's a dish. It's wonderful and it's beautiful and you get to enjoy it while you're alive. I have a sister who's married 45 years. They've never used their china. It stays in her hutch. It's just not conceivable. But people don't understand that unless they get told the story and the history of things and have an appreciation for what those objects are. And our daughter does not want a thing. But I was too busy working and not spending enough time with her why I collected this or why, and I'm preparing all my stuff the same way. Is I have marbles. I have over 20,000 marbles that I just loved marbles. I don't know nothing about them. Only in the last 3 years have I started to go through and dividing up, but I'm getting our granddaughters involved. So we separate and we look at, we're like, oh, well, we research and we're finding out more information that, okay, this is nothing, but this is good. And having that kind of connection, they want it now. That's one thing. Well, Bumpa, can I have that? If it's like absolutely. But they understand it. It's not just me enjoying it. I have to share that with my family and find out if they have an appreciation for it. Because there's sometimes with my nieces and nephews, when I used to do it, they just rolled their eyes and wanted to go play outside. They didn't care about what I was collecting. But having that communication with your family and having that all prepped up for when an organization such as us come in and help with facilitating a consignment or an estate sale, we don't know, if that's left to. Probably in this last 5 years, I think probably about 30 of our estate sales were from estate planning. That people had us in our cards in going, if anything should go, call Jonathan or call Tony at H&B Gallery. Have them come in. They know what's sellable, what's good, what's not, and make your decision on that. And it's really makes it easier for the families because they're dealing with a whole emotion that this is stuff. They're finally coming down, they lost somebody. That's more important than anything else that's in there. So part of my job is to make sure they just don't do rash decisions and start getting rid of stuff that was one point. That was a good point that Ted had made. Do not throw anything away without having someone with knowledge come. Because even when we go in, there's only so much I know. And so if there's something that just doesn't seem like you should get it away and it's not within my realm, we try to find the people that know about it and say, this has to be really looked at by a real expert. You can't know everything. And I've been blessed to be able to, hands-on for 32 years, handle things that are ancient from the 4th century all the way to brand new J. Strong water. It's the hands-on stuff has been a real treasure for me because I'm able to pass that on for my clients and help them decide what is good, bad, and don't even look at it again. But I think we're planning, I guess, is really the thing. That's all that I have. I think questions are going to probably be better off for me. But I thank you.
Yes, this is for Jonathan. What's the difference between vintage and antique? And what vintage and antique items are trending right now? What are you actually selling well?
That's a good question. Well, the rule of thumb is always 100 years is what they want to tack on to be in an antique. And your vintage is going to be really just anything else after, within a 50-year spectrum. Well, there's vintage and retro. It's all, they have. But what's been trending for us lately, and which has been a surprise, is actually the brown furniture. I hate to call that stuff. Chest of drawers, brown pieces, dining room sets. People are looking at the older antiques in the 18th century in that primarily because of the quality.
So are China hutches selling?
That they are not. With one thing with that is the newer generations are not looking to just display things. They're looking for the functionality of items. So that's why we're seeing it more going towards the furniture that they're buying, and a little bit of the decor as far as like artwork and rugs, stuff that is hand knotted and that they're finding that the secondary market they're getting more of the quality they're understanding. We've been teaching. We're fortunate we're in Uptown, so we have a wide range of age of clients. Our younger ones, we're teaching them just what I said. Put the dishes in the dishwasher. I went to an early Thanksgiving thing last weekend with friends, and she has Nartaki. She was like, I only put it on, I can't do it, I got to wash it all. I said, no. put it in there. I said, I could find you 100 sets of Noritake by tomorrow, and I can have them delivered to you for free. I said, just use it, enjoy it. It's just, but and with vintage is somewhat slowed down. Where it has picked up is not within our market. We see it more in our estate sales is going to be clothing. Clothing and accessories is really, really hot when it comes to vintage. So your 60s and 70s, even now the 80s. And we're seeing more of the men's clothing from the 90s, early 90s come into fashion. Kuji sweaters and anything Ralph Lauren, early Ralph Lauren for men and ladies. You get, with ladies right now, handbags. Handbags are the hottest things. Yeah.
So what do you recommend regarding jewelry that has been passed down through, how much jewelry can one have?
That's
So the
true.
question is jewelry, how much jewelry can one have and
Well,
depending on for-
it's just, we can consult on that in a sense, because there's obviously the material and craftsmanship that went into pieces. If it's something that's Georgian, something you may not be wearing in that, I don't know, we're very considerate when it comes to advising people when it comes to jewelry, because you got the money value of the gold and everything. It's like really be for sure that this is where you want it to end, and you're going to release that, because it is something that's easily kept. You can have a safe, you can go to a safety deposit box. This is not going to take up room, So really, when it comes to silver, anything precious like that, it's like, be aware, because it's not, you're never going to get that back. They're not producing it like that anymore. And so really be considerate on there. And there's been stuff where we've helped facilitate sending them to auction because of the quality and the sizes and that are of such that it's beyond. I mean, we do have things anywhere from $5 to $80,000 in our shop, but it's not always the best market to try it at sometimes when it comes to specifics like that. And we do that with across the board with artwork. We just had one of the largest estate sales we ever had in Edina with all period 19th century and earlier French, from bronzes to artwork. And right now, 40 of the pieces that we did not sell are going through auction at Freeman Hinman in Chicago in December before they come back to us, because that was the agreement we had. It's like, we will try this, we will put at $80,000 on this artist, but if it doesn't sell, it's not best to send it to us. Let's send it to auction. If it doesn't get that price, bring it back, and then we'll try our best on getting top dollar.
I kind of want to share something. I've got a project where I'm taking old family photos and putting them into PowerPoint and sharing it with our family. And I discovered using the scanner that came with my printer, I set up a copy stand and just used my i13 phone, much sharper images than the scanner. So it's amazing what these phones can do, or if you've got, single lens reflex, or you've got, serious photographic equipment, much better than the standard scanners that you get. So that worked very well. The other thing I was able to do was augment this with things that I found online, like even newspaper articles from the 19th century, late 19th century, that augmented these photographs from the 1890s of my great-grandparents and stuff. I found articles that reflected their life and pictures of historic buildings, schools, and stuff like that. So you can find that stuff online and augment it. The other thing was listening to the second speaker about sources for materials, that going back to the first speaker in special collections, of course, the library special collections is interested in your historic articles too, if they pertain to Minneapolis or Hennepin County or whatever. Another experience I had was with my college fraternity at the University of Minnesota. There was a historic logbook that had been maintained from 1911 until the 1950s, and then was saved by a predecessor of mine from being thrown out in a house cleaning. I got possession of that, and I contacted at Joe Ellen's suggestion, contacted the University of Minnesota archives And they took it and they're going to scan it for us so it will be available to us online. They own it now, but it will always be available to us, and the material that's on it will always be available to us. So that's another source, as was mentioned, I think the University of Minnesota, if there's something that's particular to that. That's all I wanted to say.
So I have two questions. One is, can you recommend places or people who repair, I think, antique furniture? I'm just saying antique. I mean, things that my mother had, like 60, 70 years ago, and she was a single child, and she got all the furniture from her parents. That's the one question. The other one is, I have maybe at least 20 leather postcards that were sent by my grandfather to his, fiance, and he lived in Redwood Falls, and they were sent to Malta, Ohio. In the Minnesota Historical Society do already have a lot of leather postcards, and most of these have pictures on them. I mean, they're I don't know, is it called leather burning or something like that? And then colored sometimes too. Thank you.
Okay, do we want to do furniture first? Do you have any thoughts on furniture?
We'll do furniture first
Yes.
because it's easy.
Yes.
Yes. Yes. When it comes to that, it just really depends on antique, vintage, or else what the furniture pieces is, who we refer. But yeah, we have all restoration from clocks to furniture, china, glass.
So that means if I called your gallery, then you
Yep. You can just say we need this, and we'll just give you a phone number of who we would recommend for that, and then.
And then for the postcards, so I spend a lot of time, I get random postcards in the mail. Sometimes they are sent to me as postcards and sometimes in envelopes. We are now at, I believe, 850 postcards in the Minnesota Historical Society collection that have been individually cataloged. Off the top of my head, I'm not sure what proportion of those are leather. So what I would like to say is if you want to send a donation form with a photograph of those, and I'll get you connected with the curator. Postcards are an interesting one because we can be collecting them for the image. We can also be collecting them for what's written on them. And so we are pretty full up of most of the Como Park, Minnehaha Falls, State Capitol, but we're very interested in photographs of outstate Minnesota and individual photographs. There are mass-produced postcards, and then there are much more smaller produced postcards. There were businesses where you could have your photograph taken somewhere and have that printed as a postcard, and we're very interested in those. So for that, why don't we make sure that you get the MNHS collections contact?
So, excuse me, when you're talking about restoring furniture and...
When you're talking about restoring furniture.
You might want to mention restoring photographs also?
Restoring photographs.
You want to take that one, or I can talk about conservation. So restoring photographs, there's going to be a couple options, and it's really going to be about your price range. So some of those commercial businesses like Astound or similar will have limited restoration options where they will probably be doing a form of digital retouching. They'll scan the image and then they'll put it into a Photoshop or similar program, and they will do their best to give you a digital version that has been colored. They've cleaned up creases and things like that. That's going to be an affordable option if you would like to see the photograph as it would look restored. If you want to have the physical photograph restored, we're going to be talking hundreds to perhaps thousands of dollars. Photographs are a very transient material, at which point I would probably start you at the, I just call them MAC, Midwest Art Conservation. They are in the basement of MIA. They are our local professional conservators, and they could refer you out. But again, I would expect the physical restoration of a photograph to cost quite a bit of money. A digital restoration is probably going to be a lot more reasonable for most people.
Regarding the photographs, I just saw, I think 2 days ago, somebody showed an AI thing that you can plug an old photograph that's scratched and missing a few pieces, and they took it, and then in about a minute, it gave a completely restored. You can colorize it. Is that more of a challenge for you, that you're getting stuff now that maybe you'd rather have the original that's crumpled and not fixed? Because I don't think it costs anything now if you can get an AI app to restore a photograph in a minute.
So these kinds of materials are called born digital. So they have only ever existed in a digital form. And they are I don't want to say a thorn, they are a bud of new opportunity for museums. As Ted mentioned, our gold standard is going to be the analog. We almost always are collecting the original. We typically don't even collect copies because we are really interested in that original artifact. Digital materials are starting to come in. I have actually worked on a project where we received what was functionally a form of an Instagram archive of somebody's experience during March through June 2020. And she was an artist archiving her experiences. And so we are starting to collect these born digital materials. File decay is a big problem. And I would recommend, if you have digital materials, just get in contact with the archive and they can let you know. We're going to be looking for things like, if you're curious about the specifics, PNG and TIFF files or PDFs, some of those more permanent and non-proprietary image formats. But we have received terabytes and terabytes of emails from government records. So we are continuing to explore the born digital. I have not faced any AI at MNHS yet, but it is on the way, and I am looking forward to those departmental conversations. I bet they will be very interesting.
Is there an archive of women in medical services? I have a photograph of the graduating class of 1905 of the Minnesota School of Pharmacy. And my grandmother is the only female graduate in that class. And she practiced until she died in 1968. So she started out as a compounding pharmacist, making her medicines from recipes, if you will, or formulas, all the way through the development of vaccines and antibiotics and all kinds of drugs that were used by 1968. I have a very large photograph that needs to find a new home, if I can talk to somebody about that.
Yeah, if you also want to shoot me an email, we can get that conversation started with our curator of photography. Off the top of my head, MNHS might be interested. There is also the Blangenstein at the University of Minnesota is like a biomedical library. I'm not sure to what extent they collect like historical materials. And then there are also some smaller groups that are like Association of University Women and other sororal organizations that have been collecting history. So if your grandmother was a part of any of those kinds of organizations, they may also be interested. So we can get that conversation started. That's the part where you might get bounced around a little bit, but if you can stick with us, we'll probably get you to a good place.
I think that could be especially helpful because I've seen some of those photos. They can be really large, and finding the right repository for it. Yeah,
the biggest photograph I have ever.
Fit in a little house anymore.
I once got an email from someone where she was like, "Well, I've got a nice photo," and I said, "That sounds great. Why don't you pop it in the mail to me?" And she said, "I think it's best if I drive it." And then I finally got in touch with her to pick it up, and it was 6.5 feet long. And I was like, that. I was like, this is not going to fit in the back of my Honda Fit. We're going to have to figure something out. But yeah, some of those photographs can be huge. Yes, collectors at MNHS.
Well, I think this has been fun. Thank you for your expertise. Thank you, and thank everybody.